top 1% have consistently mastered the game of wealth accumulation. The average income at the top is $1.32 million a year. The other 99% only average $50,000. The top 10% control about 80% of all wealth. Do you want to know their secret? There are 3 choices that'll make you rich or poor. It's all about your wealth, keeping it and building it. Do you know the rules of the money games? Do you know how to beat everyone else and get richer? The rules of the game will work for everyone, but you have to use them deliberately, aggressively, and consistently with your wealth. Do you want to win the money games? There's always winners and losers, but do you realize that most lose and to the victor goes the spoils? What's the key to winning? Minimizing the risk of not keeping all your dollars and recognizing that a majority will lose a percentage of theirs because they didn't transfer the risk. Do you see the opportunity? You could capitalize on that opportunity. Can being at the right place at the right time profit you? Look at the 1%. They're not magicians, but opportunists. Before proceeding, I want to apologize for the video quality and the lack of Hollywood presentation and flair, but you are getting the substance, and timing is critical. These are perilous times. I appreciate your time, so I won't waste any of it. If you need to pause at any time, go right ahead, but let's dive in. Step 1 is identify the 3 choices that'll make you rich or poor, both in making it and keeping it. Think of it like a wealth bucket. Controlling the inflow and outflow is key. Do you understand it's much easier to lose your wealth than to gain it, and you can lose it much quicker than you can gain it? The reason is risk, whether direct or indirect, that causes loss of your wealth. Increase the wealth inflow to your bucket while compounding it as risk-free as possible. Doesn't it seem that the wealth game is purposely overcomplicated? Think of it like a casino would. Keep them playing while the risks are stacked in their favor. The longer you play, the more money you're going to lose. Control the risk and you'll keep your wealth. We all play financial games in life with similar outcomes unless you remove the risk. The risks are always your responsibility because it's your money. Fail to act and you will lose over time. Now the 3 choices that'll make you rich or poor. Choice 1 is no action, the default choice. It's usually the most costly on the back end because all the cost is on and the losses are on the back end. Then there's choice number 2, self-insuring. It's not no action because you're taking fiscal action yourself to counteract the risk. Then there's choice 3, transferring the risk. Now, transferring the risk with direct control is the best. Because if you lose direct control of the risk, you lose control of the outcome, which can lead to even worse outcomes. The fear of making bad choices and lack of confidence are major justifications for this, but act in contradiction to your fear and be accountable for your outcomes using fewer pennies to keep your dollars. A good example of this is insurance. Picture in your mind getting there and math will make it happen. Do you understand that you will always have the greatest interest in your wealth growing? Those that stay wealthy do not give up control of their money. Remove the greatest risk to your wealth while using the fewest pennies to keep your dollars. What are the risks? That's step number 2. Step 2, stop it and you'll keep it. Stop the risk and keep your money. I'll review the top risks, then come back and go into greater detail on each. The top risk to your wealth. Number 1, the loss of cash flow. Number 2, taxes. 3, critical and chronic care. Number 4, market loss. Risk 5, others losing your money for you. Risk 6, interest and fees on bad debt. Risk 7, behavior and spending habits. Risk 8, starting too late or starting saving too late. Risk 9, relying on Uncle Sam and Social Security. Risk number 10, opportunity risk of becoming a meal ticket. Risk number 11, college cost. And risk 12, the death of an earner, disability, or outliving your savings. Picture again that wealth bucket, limiting the leak out, the risk. Keep filling it, compounding it, while increasing the inflow, which will help grow it exponentially. It's math and decisive action that will grow your wealth. If you had a plan producing the greatest financial outcome with the least upfront cost, would you act on it to grow rich? I fill that unknown for you so that you spend fewer pennies to keep your dollars. Risk 1, loss of cash flow. A lesson of COVID-19 is that cash is king. You can't pay your bills on equity. Having no cash leads to fire sale of assets, bad debt, or losing those assets altogether. Your financial blood is in the water. The sharks are circling. Do you want to be the meal? Maintain cash flow when others can't, and you'll grow. Account for this risk in your plan. Risk number 2, taxes. Taxes and regulations have dropped dramatically since this new administration. The top current tax bracket is 37%. It's been as high as 94%. Do you want to pay less taxes on your wealth when it's bigger? Of course. Pay on the seed, not the harvest. USDebtClock.org shows that as of 9/1 of 2020, we have the highest U.S. debt ever, more than all prior years combined. The debt to GDP is at 153.54%, the highest in history. Derivatives are over 693 trillion. Unfunded debt over 81 trillion. Funded debt almost 27 trillion. Unfunded liabilities of over 154 trillion, and about 9 trillion in federal, state, and local annual spending. That's just over $995 trillion on the debt and liability side. Only 127 trillion in total U.S. assets. Current Federal Reserve of 2.7 trillion, 786 billion in the Treasury, and about 131 trillion in assets. That's about $131 trillion in assets to date. 7.6 times more debt and liabilities than assets. Current interest on the debt is about 4.15 trillion per year, while federal revenue is only 2.7 trillion. The U.S. is paying more in interest on the debt than we generate. So we're essentially printing money to pay the interest on our debt that we can never pay down. Our saving grace is that the U.S. dollar is essentially the worldwide currency. If that changes, our money will be dramatically less or worth less overnight. Our economic position is the worst it's ever been in U.S. history. Again, worse than all prior years combined. Yet taxes are at historic lows. Are you prepared for the consequence? Isn't it feasible or even common sense that future tax rates will go up dramatically? Either way, the math is clearly on the side of tax-free growth. Let's use an example of this. We'll take two $1 bills and we'll double them for 20 periods. One being tax deferred, the other tax free. The $1 bill that was tax free grew to 20 times that of the tax deferred, to over $1 million. The tax deferred dollars just grew to about 58,000. That's over $990,000 more for those tax-free dollars. Do you want more of your money? Account for this risk in your plan. Risk number 3, critical and chronic illness. 3 out of 4 people in their lives will lose over 50% of their wealth, even with a majority having health insurance. It's the leading cause of bankruptcies, foreclosures, and business failures. Do you want to be part of those statistics? Account for this risk in your plan. Risk 4 and 5, market loss and others losing your money. Both are losses. Growing it was a goal, but justifying the loss as a natural part of growth is nonsense. Others losing our money has the same outcome. Justification can be lack of expertise, lack of self-confidence, change of capacity like health, mental, or age, and fear. How can losing wealth ever make you wealthier? It doesn't make any sense. It's always contrary to wealth. The greatest investor of our time, Warren Buffett, put it best this way. He has 2 rules of investing. Number 1, never lose your money. Rule number 2, don't ever forget rule number 1. Obeying these rules keeps a target off your back. Do you really want to unknowingly donate your wealth to other people? Stop accepting advice from anyone who has lost any of your money at any time. Expect good returns, but also the return of all your money. Forward, never backwards. Who has to live with the consequence of having less wealth? You do. The truth is you can lose more wealth and lose it quicker than you can gain it. This is due to mathematics and physics, and you've seen a visual example of this. Here's an example here of a 50% loss. It would take a corresponding 100% return just to get back to where you were. And just picture this in your mind. If you had a dollar, you had a 50% loss, it would get you back to 50%. If you had a subsequent 50% gain, it only gets you to 75 cents, not the dollar. So it takes 100% gain. Well, 60% gain would take, or loss, would take 150% subsequent gain to recoup. 70%, it would take 233% gain. 80%, 400% gain to get back to where you were. And then a 90% loss, over 900% just to get back to where you were, and not to mention the amount of time it would take you to get there without having any further losses. Account for this risk in your plan. Let's dive deeper and use real life examples here. Financial audits are used for the purpose of verifying accuracy of financial projections, usually done by accountants, CPAs, actuaries, using actual numbers, not projected numbers. Since 1994, Dalbar has done what we call the Dalbar's Quantitative Analysis of Investor Behavior, QAIB, basically a financial audit, that measures actual returns, consistently showing that the average investor earns less, in many cases far less than the mutual funds suggest. Matter of fact, using the average from the 2010 study, 2015 study, and the 2020 study, averaging those together, the studies show that the 30-year return for individual investors was 3.79%, versus the S&P that showed 10.5%. The 20-year return, 4.2% versus the S&P's 8.2%. The 10-year return for individual investors, 3.16% versus the S&P average of 13.6%. Picture in your mind this practically. The 90-year average for the Standard & Poor's index was 9.8%. Again, that's the index. That's not what individual investors got. But the average investor got far less. Matter of fact, less than 4% over that same period. Market losses, costs, fees, loads, charges, and fund expenses were the culprits. After taxes, that's barely keeping above inflation. Are you okay with that? Again, you got to account for this in your plan. Losses are just not for just for average folks. Matter of fact, here's some examples of millionaires who've lost everything. There's Nicolas Cage lost over 150 million. Mike Tyson 400 million. Willie Nelson 16.7. Discover a few of these. Michael Jackson 300 million. Let's see, 200 million for Evander Holyfield. Wayne Newton over 20 million. Michael Vick over 130 million. Here's some examples of billionaires who've lost everything. There's Bernie Madoff over 65 billion. Alberto Villar 1 billion. This Gunderson 1.1 billion. Elizabeth Holmes 9 billion. It goes on and on here. Well, what can we learn? These millionaires and billionaires have something in common. They didn't transfer the risk, and it's not what you make, it's what you keep that matters. You've got to account for this. Here's examples of the billionaires' losses just with COVID. In a 2-month period, they lost over $408 billion. Again, risk must be accounted for if you want to keep your money. How does this all affect me growing rich? 90% of all financial advisors fail and go out of business. The average investor using someone else other than themselves suffers a loss in the market every 4.3 years. Over a 30-year average investor earns less than 4%. You know, we used that Dalbar study earlier to show, again, this. Also, the Hulbert 36-year study, that Hulbert Digest, concluded that the average of the top 1,700 advisors' long-term average return was 3.4%. Better, you've done better in the S&P index. Do you like running that hamster wheel? Because it's all about what you keep that really matters. Risk number 6, interest and fees on bad debt. Most people finance on a hope of a better life, focusing on ability to pay it. The wealthy enjoy appreciating assets while the poor depreciating assets. The difference is debt. The rich man's busy dancing while the poor man pays the band. Would you prefer to have a debt-free life? You've got to account for this risk in your plan. Risk number 7, behavior and bad spending habits. Risk number 8, starting too late. And risk number 9, relying on Uncle Sam and Social Security. Whether fear of following experts, that which is, by the way, is not a plan, not having a written budget, or chasing market gains, as we mentioned earlier, 50% or more less return by that Dalbar study that individual investors got versus the index. A stockbroker, advisor, insurance agent, attorney, CPA, they're not plans. They can be expert tools within a plan, but like a blueprint, instruction manual, it must be written. Like a business, keeping you goal focused and focused on the most cost-effective tools to get you there. Isn't that just practical? The average family right now, a recent study showed that they had less than $500 in emergency cash. That's crazy. Do you have a written plan? If not, why? It's vitally important, and it's your money. You've got to account for this risk in your plan. And then risk number 8, again, that's starting to save too late. Einstein said the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest. Those that understand it earn it. Those who don't pay it. Are you fully leveraging this in your favor? It's a mathematical fact. Starting late makes it harder to grow it. The more compounding periods you have, the less return is needed on that original principle. Removing the greatest risk while leaving more of it to compound is the key. Would you rather be a day late and a dollar short, or live an abundant life? Start today and account for this risk in your plan. And again, relying on Uncle Sam and Social Security. Get the maximum out of Uncle Sam without partnering with him within your retirement. Would you be happy with your money on Uncle Sam's all-you-can-eat buffet? The USDebtClock.org shows more debt than all prior years combined, as I mentioned earlier. If the dollar wasn't the world currency, our standard of living would be dramatically lower overnight. Gold has also hit the highest level ever, and they predict it's going to go up another 50% more. That's an indicator. Banks predict, that's, by the way, a prediction of banks. Are you prepared for hard times? Possibly times worse than the Great Depression, or worst depression ever. Politicians have hosed us over and over again. Have you had enough? Don't fear. Just account for this risk in your plan. Risk number 10, the opportunity of becoming a meal ticket. IRAs are easily attached after a lawsuit. You have to insulate yourself so they can't get your money. Do you want somebody else to retire on your dime? Don't give control of your wealth to anyone, even financial advisors. Loss of the control of your money, or you lose control of your money, you lose control of your outcome. You know the saying, the road to ruin was paved by good intention. Do you really want to be on that road? You've got to account for this risk in your plan. Risk number 11, college cost. A 4-year undergraduate degree costs almost as much as the average home, and it takes almost or around 6 years. Colleges are becoming politically indoctrinators, not preparing for a desired standard of living. Colleges are going bankrupt. Professors are being charged with crimes like even treason, and students are being saddled with debt. Are you willing for your loved ones to be carrying any more burdens than they have to? You've got to account for this risk in your plan. Risk number 12, death of a wage earner, disability, or outliving your savings. These are some of the greatest risks, because when the money valve is shut off, your cash flow is immediately affected. The ripple effect on your finances is huge. Disability is the only one that can be a temporary one. The others are permanent, and the only solution is to have a ready replacement of that cash flow before it happens. Are you insured to never run out of cash no matter what? You've got to account for this risk in your plan. To review, there are 3 choices that'll make you rich or poor. Risk causes loss of wealth and the growth. So there's the answer are no losses of cash flow. Grow it tax-free. An example of that $1 that doubled for 20 periods grew to over $990,000 more in those tax-free dollars. Paid up critical care, keeping 50% more of your wealth. Market gains without market losses. Eliminating bad debt. Equity, not debt for college. Written budget. Preventing bad spending habits. Don't become a meal ticket. Limiting bad Uncle Sam. And control over your money at all times so that you never run short of money. Your choice number 1 is no action, the default choice. Choice number 2, self-insure. The choice number 3, transferring that risk, with direct control being optimal. The best choice takes fewer pennies to keep your dollars. And increasing your cash flow multiplies those results. Do you have the details to make your best choice? Step 4, reward or dead end. It's your choice. The hardest thing to overcome is fear. It's not mathematically rational, so evidence doesn't necessarily get action. Fear symptoms are procrastination, avoidance, denial, the status quo, maintaining status quo, irrationality, bad past experience, following the herd, broad assumptions, a fear of accountability, and anything that doesn't directly support a mathematical outcome. Will fear keep you from abundant life? Fear can stop you from acting on what will keep your wealth. The poor people are controlled by fear. Rich people act despite their fear, becoming richer by making those hard choices. The poor fear and avoid acting, receiving bad outcomes, so it's harder to change. Fear is used to control. We see this everywhere. Will you allow it to limit your potential in life? Step 5, taking action. Do you have a roadmap, a blueprint to wealth? I design a simple and logical plan starting today for your risk. Spend, again, pennies to keep your dollars. The plan costs you nothing. Essentially, I bid on one of your 3 choices. My goal, obviously, is to underbid the other choices. The providers compensate me. You don't. An example of this is homeowners insurance. I'll use my home, matter of fact. With liability and fiscal asset coverage of just under $2 million, it costs me 1 cent per year to keep protect every $64. 1 penny for $64. That's over 640% cheaper than the other 2 choices. Do you get it? The same principle works for almost everything that can take your wealth or where you can lose your wealth. Put simply, the final quote will show you which choices cost you, again, fewer pennies to keep your dollars. And normally it's dramatically different, so it's easy to act. Step 6, the coming storm in your foundation. Look at what we're seeing around us. Is there a simple answer to what seems to make no sense? We see such polarization with no middle ground. The love of money is the root of all evil, which also pertains to your intrinsic or worldly worth. Value can be money, sex, control, work, care, support, votes, power, revenge, blame, provision. Do you realize that all manner of evil can be justified if they win without accountability? Why is the left attacking supposed thoughts, not actions? And how do thoughts actually and they by the way claim that the other are doing what they claim the other side is doing? And how does thoughts affect physical reality? The Bible calls it mammon. You cannot serve God and mammon, for you'll love one and you'll hate the other. What you experience must return to the logical, mathematical principles to regain control. Another review of what we've learned: you continually play financial games in life. Picture again that financial bucket, filling it with wealth, growing it without letting any out the holes. And again, those holes are risk. The goal is to keep your wealth, grow it, add more to your bucket. Others who make mistakes and you don't, you'll be able to capitalize on that because to the victor goes the spoils. Do you recognize the games that you have little or no choice to play in life? Do you know what controls wealth? It's math. Emotion is incalculable and does not guarantee an outcome. Math can. Do you realize using anything else will cause you to lose over time? Example again is that casino. If you play based on their rules, the longer you play, the more of your money you're going to lose. You've got to account for this in your plan. What I'm about to tell you may test your emotions, but you have to keep that in check. Remember, fear is used to control. Why is the Democratic Party moving in lockstep with big tech while the media keeps everyone in line or shuts them up if they step out of line? Always follow the money. They're good people on both sides. I'm not saying they're not, but it's about control, playing the game under the house rules. Whoever controls has control wins. Why is it Democrats? And why is the change so drastic? The top took the party that had more control over to win. It's about the money. Follow the money. It's practical control of the risk to win the game. Why is evil now called good and good? What was good now called evil? Remember, the goal of the game is to win. Just like poker, distraction and bluffing can be a strong move to win. The goal is to have everyone play, controlling the risk to win. Is what you've done in the past more important than winning? Use the math, control your emotions, control the risk to win. Do you believe what you're being told? Social distancing, mask, no church, but no political rallies, public fitness, games, schools, dating, but go all out for violent protests, tearing down monuments, riots, intimidation, blocking streets, looting, unfettered abortion clinics, unrestricted immigration. But you can't say the China virus where it originated. Banning and removing conservative videos, demonetizing, removing Facebook posts, big tech deciding what is free speech, not the Constitution. Defunding police, praising rioters and looters, the gospel being hate speech, arresting pastors, again closing churches, taking away tax-exempt status for churches, but release violent criminals so they don't get coronavirus. Healthy, non-virus infected people can't congregate, but you can force infected elderly patients or put into nursing homes where the most vulnerable, not hospitals, where a lot of them died. Test millions, push non-confirmed deaths as COVID-19, but ban doctors that speak on possible treatment alternatives. College students with debts as high as the average home, taught America's racist, communism and fascism is fairer, hate your country, activism rather than providing a proper standard of living. Say anything contrary to the left and you're racist, misogynistic, homophobe. It's crazy. Unless you follow the money. Look at the big picture and think of it logically. Again, back to the U.S. debtclock.org confirms as of September 1st, we're at a total debt to GDP of 153%, the highest in history. GDP dropped 35%, the largest deficit in U.S. history, more than all other years combined, and this has been decades in the making. This has been decades in the making. We are broke. Printing money just to cover interest, and at this point, we don't have enough money to pay the interest. We're having to print it. China has been emboldened, aiming to replace the dollar, which would make it almost worthless. Why is the left cheering China and throwing America under the bus? Doesn't make any sense unless you follow the money. Losing against China drastically lowers the standard of living. The Fed has lowered the rates to almost zero, pumping money in like mad. There's over 4 million homes in forbearance. About half are due here we're due in September. About 1/5 of the renters are behind in rent, 1.2 million unemployed, 4.9 million furloughed, 6.6 million dropped out. about 21 million are unemployed. By 2021, they expect it could be about 20 million unemployed, not even counting furloughed and dropout. Whether you have a D, I, or an R, bleeding green, we're all going to feel the same. Are you ready to tighten your budgets and get your financial houses in order to prepare for what's to come? Is our government cutting back before and becoming more efficient? Well, let's look at the Democratic side. They're proposing 11 to 55 trillion, possibly 100 trillion in additional spending. The Green New Deal, Medicare for all, health care for all, including immigrants and illegals, climate control, infrastructure, paid leave, paid housing, reparations, universal basic income for all, subsidized child care, subsidized rent, free college, eliminating private insurance, banning the use of fossil fuels, drastically reducing methane directly with farmers. Yes, they're talking about regulating cow farms. Republicans proposed in the 2021 budget called for $4.4 trillion in cuts or savings to reduce the deficit every year to a sustainable trajectory to reach a balanced budget. Here's the big problem. There's a gap of a negative 4.4 trillion versus over 50 trillion. The size couldn't be further apart. The 2021 budget in February that was released is still dead on arrival as of the 1st of October. There's no action. Gold is soaring, the highest in history. The Fed's indefinite lowering or pledged to indefinite lowering until a turnaround. Real estate and the stock market so far are roaring, despite we're on the verge of the greatest depression in world history. The object, again, is to get everyone into the game until the inflow dries up and the market drops. The top take their profits and get out, but everyone else, by the time they catch on, is too late. They get hosed. That every major crash has followed that pattern. Are you ready to lose like the last depression of over 90% plus? Remember, those at the top need you not to catch on before it's too late, so the majority's wealth will transfer to them. With massive injections of liquidity, the near-term timing of the crash is hard to predict. But this is the longest upturn or market run in U.S. history, and the market's always correct. It's just natural. But we've got why is this the worst in history? Well, there's all the factors that affect it are absolutely exponentially worse than any other time in history. No other time in U.S. history has all the tools been lined up for you to be able to get your financial house in order and become rich if aligned. Realize that this is a marathon, not a sprint. If you aren't 100% committed to winning, don't even kid yourself. Why is commitment imperative? Once this turns, you'll either be rich or poor. There'll be very little in the middle. The degree to which is completely up to you. It will be the greatest transfer of wealth ever seen. There's absolutely no reason you can't beat everyone else that doesn't transfer that risk. You've got to catch. Contact me and we'll start a needs analysis to put a plan together to make the right choice. Each choice will have its own cost and inevitable outcome. You decide which of the three leaves you with more dollars for fewer pennies. The right one will be incredibly simple. Your success, however, is completely dependent on taking action immediately. Otherwise, your efforts have done nothing. It costs you nothing to get your answer, absolutely nothing. I bid to transfer your risk, and my goal is to come in the lowest bidder. Then I build and compound your wealth as risk-free as possible. To start your no-cost analysis, contact me by phone, email, or click on the like button so we can continue to help others or get the word out. Also consider sending this video or a copy of this link to family and friends, and I invite you to video number 3 in the 3 choices that'll make you rich or poor, God's plan. I wish you great success in life for what lies ahead for you. My hope is that you prepare because the storm is coming. You consider soberly the math. God bless.